answers, I change the questions. It's me, Austin!
Who are you to doubt El Dandy? Because this guy's a serious professional.
Brett screwed Brett.
Yeah! Can he do it? Cover! Oh, and a kick out! Unbelievable!
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. Make sure if you're a YouTube user, click the bell so they notify you every time a new episode goes live. Are you sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest and greatest wrestling video game? Stop immediately. Go to Wrestler Unstoppable, available exclusively through Facebook. Look, you can create a wrestler, sign contracts, get involved in storylines, headline pay-per-views, even build your own corporation, all included in Wrestler Unstoppable, available now to all Facebook users, totally free. If you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, want your name in the shoutouts like my buddy John down in Texas, then pop by our Patreon page at patreon.com/Pro Wrestling Podcast. Sign up today. If you're a $15 a month contributor, you can host a live show with me. $7.50 a month contributors entered into a drawing to do just the same. Hello, everybody. Welcome in this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you've got questions, comments, something you'd like for us to talk about in a future episode, give us a shout. The Pro Wrestling Sound Off line, 267-642-1160, and then we will get to those in a future episode. And as we get started with tonight's show, big news coming out of AEW that Jade Cargill, the young lady who they literally spent the better part of their entire existence building to be the next big thing, to be the big superstar in the female division of AEW, the one who went on her incredible winning streak, finally returns to the promotion last week, attacks Chris Statlander, who was the one who ended her undefeated streak, and then they obviously set up the Cargill versus Statlander 2 rematch, and what happened? If you know anything about how these spoiler things work, Chris Statlander is going to pick up the win, defeat Cargill. That's not the part that is interesting to me. You know, she's had a total of 64 matches in the company. She was 62-0, loses her last 2 matches, and now the word is she is leaving AEW to head to WWE to be a featured talent on NXT. I love it for her. If you're AEW, though, I question the use of Cargill, putting all that emphasis into her, building a character that you eventually don't foster enough, and certainly for some reason, something about negotiations of contracts in that company, they didn't get her taken care of in a way that made her want to stay or give her the schedule she wanted or give her the opportunities she wanted or whatever. And there are people who are debating right now what the catalyst for her wanting to leave AEW could be. Now, this is the second major star leaving AEW for WWE, but this is their first homegrown talent. You know, understandably, Cody Rhodes returned to WWE. He had a history there. There was already a fan base there, even if he didn't love the character they gave him there. But with Jade Cargill, this is a homegrown talent who you would think, when you hear the people talk about AEW, who've been there since the beginning, they talk so much about the loyalty and the atmosphere and all those things that they want to be a part of. And now this happens. And you have to ask yourself, what's going on in AEW? Now, you know, there's people who argue over, is this Tony Khan's management style? Did he bring on too many wrestlers and now there's not enough airtime to keep everybody happy? Maybe that's a factor. Maybe she wants to be on television more. Perhaps she likes the distribution and the opportunities that having a WWE career provides her in a larger sense. Maybe she doesn't want to wrestle forever and she wants to use WWE as a platform to springboard her to something maybe in Hollywood or acting or modeling or whatever. But whatever it is, for whatever reason, we are going to see Jade Cargill, it sounds like, leave AEW and head to WWE in the near future. Now, of course, I'm sure she'll have some kind of time where she doesn't appear. Her contract originally was a 3-year deal signed, I believe, in 2020 in October. So it may be a hot minute before we see her in WWE, but the word is that's where she's headed. The flip the script is that Edge, former WWE megastar, Hall of Famer, multi-time world champion, he has apparently been removed from WWE's internal roster. What that means is, for those who are not in the know in how this wrestling thing works in WWE, they have their writers take a talent list and they try to come up with storylines for, months ahead of time. and plan for people, all these different characters. Normally, if you have anything in the cards, even as far out as WrestleMania or Royal Rumble, they'll put you in there so they can come up with the ways that they're going to incorporate you into television programming. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible for Edge to come back to WWE and work something out, get a new contract or whatever. And there was even a report a couple weeks ago that may happen. The issue I have is this, to me, sounds a lot more like Edge is leaving and joining his buddy Christian over in AEW. I get it. People theorize he could retire. He could walk away. He can't do some of the moves he used to be able to do in the same way that he used to be able to do them. But that, to me, actually opens the door even more to AEW. We know he had conversations with Tony Khan before WWE brought him back, before he got cleared, before the Rumble and all those things. And he actually was thinking about going to AEW. However, I think the big drawing factor for Edge now is in WWE, despite the fact that the fans all know he was gone for all those years with the neck issue and whatnot, you expect Edge to be the same Edge you've always seen in the ring. And what AEW does do for former WWE talent is it provides them with a platform that's totally different where they can create new characters and new ways of wrestling. Edge, for some of those moves that are more difficult for him to do at this advanced stage of his career, he may not have to in AEW. He can come up with other ways to contribute and to put on a performance that don't necessarily have to include all of those skills that he had when he was a lot younger. I think it's a good fit for him. As a WWE guy from basically the beginning of my fandom, it's hard to see a WWE guy with this much of an established career go to AEW, and it's not dumping on AEW. It's going to be weird, just like it was weird to see Christian there, or The Big Show, or Mark Henry, or any of the WWE guys. It wasn't as weird to see Danielson and to see CM Punk and people like that because they had been in like Ring of Honor and places like that prior to that, and I was familiar with that. But this would be weird. Yes, I get the Damon Stryker thing for a hot minute in WCW, and I know he was, Sexton Hardcastle on the Indies before that and his own Adam Copeland. But this is different. This is a major megastar making a turn to AEW, or at least that's the theory, and I'll be very curious to see how that plays out over the long term in their programming. A little bit of controversy around AEW this week because there is apparently the United Kingdom government kind of threw a wrench into AEW. They're gloating over the All-In pay-per-view at Wembley Stadium. So the people in the stadium there was an announced paid attendance of 81,035 people, which would break records for the number of paid attendance. But according to a Freedom of Information request published on What Do They Know, which is a website that does these things, they looked at the turnstile count for All In. The turnstile count is how many people actually walked into the building, which would also not only account for those people who were in there with paid admission, but also all the free tickets they gave out, which they did give some out. The all-in total turnstile count was 72,265, which means that's the number of people who walked into Wembley Stadium. It's well under what they announced as the paid attendance number. So unless there's a whole lot of people who bought tickets and didn't go, this is a little bit of a shocker. And for all those people who talk about that, who holds what record for most successful, this, that, and the other, WWE's WrestleMania 32, which took place in Arlington, Texas, had 80,709 through the turnstiles. So whatever people want to claim about paid attendance, other people in the building, like the WrestleMania 32, people talked about, WWE published that it was over 100,000 people in attendance. It was when you factor in, the popcorn salesman and the soda guy and the person working the merchandise stands and all that kind of stuff. But actual people who walk through the turnstiles, 80,709. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the long-term conversation about what actually went down at All In. But, I'm glad at least people are talking about it, because AEW was like hanging their hat on the fact that they did the most successful show ever. This kind of lends to the conversation that maybe it actually didn't. Maybe people paid for tickets, but it doesn't sound like all those people showed up to the show, which is somewhat frustrating. Back to WWE news. I love that if you ever listen to Busted Open Radio, Mickie James had a great take on Becky Lynch winning the NXT Women's Championship. Everybody has, you either love people who love it or people who hate it. I, for one, think it's a great idea, and here's why. And I agree with Mickie James on this. It's a good move by WWE. Tiffany Stratton is just beginning to scratch the surface of what she's going to be able to do in the long haul. Whether it's the similarity in appearance, the similarity in name, Tiffany Stratton to Trish Stratus, she could be the next version of Trish Stratus's character going forward. She really could be that. But much like Braun Breaker, who had a lot of hoopla about how great he was doing in NXT, needed a character change to show this, heel side of him, which has made him much more appealing, in my opinion. Tiffany Stratton needed something where a main roster star comes in, knocks her off the pedestal, and then just like Dolph Ziggler did to Braun Breaker, at this point, Stratton will at some point regain that championship, which will only make her look even stronger and potentially put her in a position to come to the main roster sooner rather than later and be a bigger contributor. She will, in my opinion, get a win over Becky. I think it's great that you give Becky the championship, give her that women's grand slam, so to speak. But I think the big thing that people miss out on is you do not run somebody like Stratton undefeated for forever and then bring her up. That really is not a formula that works. Look at Jade Cargill, 62-0, loses 1, loses 2, and gone from a company. You lose steam at some point. This brings Stratton back down. Now she has to chase the championship, get it back. It shows her tenacity. It shows her commitment to the business, and people will probably love her even more for having done this with such a big star like Becky Lynch, who is an absolute marquee name. She's the man. I love the move. I think it's a great idea. And the last thing I want to get into tonight, I've been wrestling with this all day. A couple things kind of bug me about it. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, when I was growing up, was the publication. And it was like the reference point for anything and everything that was important in professional wrestling. There was, the after mags, you had Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, and PWI. But PWI is like the big one. I actually liked Inside Wrestling better because at the back of the book, it had the list of every champion in the world. I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. That was my indoctrination into how big wrestling was beyond WWE. But Pro Wrestling Illustrated, they love their rankings every month. Their stories were phenomenal. I have a bunch of great copies all the way back to their first issue that had... it was a mass superstar and Dusty Rhodes on the cover. I have that autographed. It's a great thing that I'm so thankful that I have. Going all the way back to then, just a phenomenal magazine. And they started coming out years ago with the PWI 500. Congrats at first to Seth Rollins for coming in first place this year. I have no problem with Seth Rollins. As a matter of fact, I find the top 3 very interesting. Seth Rollins at 1, Roman Reigns at 2, Jon Moxley at 3. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm okay with all of those. Rollins trying to take a championship and make it relevant that was defunct for quite a while, and being the guy who's supposed to be main eventing when Roman Reigns isn't around. You can't argue with Roman Reigns and the Bloodline storyline being the biggest storyline in wrestling for the better part of the last couple of years. And Moxley, really, he's the always consistent, always reliable guy in AEW. They followed up number 4 is Gunther, which I think is, I'd be okay with Gunther at 1, but him being at 4, I think, is a lot of respect as a guy who's carrying a mid-level title that, yes, he's making more prestigious, maybe than all the championships in WWE, but because he doesn't have one of those, you kind of have to back him down a little bit. After Gunther at number 5, Vikingo, I think he's phenomenal. Great future. I love that he's included. Then is MJF, Kazuchika Okada. The top 7, I have not one issue with. It's when you get to 8, 9, and 10. And I won't go beyond 10. That's not true. I'm going to bring up one other one. But in the top 10, at 8, they put Orange Cassidy. Now, I get it. The International Championship has a lot of prestige in AEW. But if anybody's going to try to convince me that Orange Cassidy is a better performer or a better wrestler than Cody Rhodes, then you got to tell me what the heck you're watching. I get it. Orange Cassidy can put on some comedy, and then he throws in some athleticism, and he has a few spots that he hits that are phenomenal. But he's not Cody Rhodes. He's not even the guy who comes in at number 9, Josh Alexander from Impact Wrestling. Josh Alexander, I have a tough time with him being ahead of Cody Rhodes, but I can at least wrap my brain around that because he's a phenomenal, more amateur-looking style wrestler, and he's very believable. For me, Cody would have been in at 8, Alexander at 9, stay at 9, and Cassidy, I don't even know if he'd make my top 10. I only would give him that respect if I had to put him in there because of having that lengthy championship reign with the International Championship. But there are so many other talents that I feel like should have been in the top 10 before Orange Cassidy. I have a really tough time with that. I think it's almost a slap in the face because let's be honest, Roman Reigns coming in at 2 is great. But why was Roman Reigns number 2? It was because of the Usos, Zayn and Owens. It was because of Cody Rhodes. If those are the people who have put you in that position, then clearly they must be performing at a high level as well. I would have been much happier if I would have seen Cody Rhodes at 8, Josh Alexander at 9, or even 10, and Sami Zayn, who for the whole first part of the year was at the top of the card, and he was the man that before Cody, everybody thought should have beaten Roman Reigns when they were in Canada. And then Cody should have won at Mania is what a lot of people felt. Now, I have no problem with the fact that he didn't at this point. I'm a little over it. But the reality is how you put Orange Cassidy ahead of Cody, ahead of Sami Zayn, ahead of Jey Uso even Solo Sikoa. How do you put these people over them? Even Chad Gable. Now, granted, they decide these things a couple months before the magazine actually comes out, which only further makes Sami Zayn a much higher level competitor, should have been in the top 10. That's just my opinion. I have a real problem with Orange Cassidy occupying that spot. No disrespect to Orange Cassidy. He's one of my favorites to watch. I just don't think he's a good enough wrestler. That's my only complaint. And and on this same token, same topic, but going outside the top 10, I have a tough time, not with someone being ranked at 15 who hasn't earned it. And I'm talking about Masha Slamovich, who's ranked at 15. A female wrestler in the PWI 500 is not what bothers me. I want to clarify this right away because there's going to be somebody who thinks it's a male-female thing. I couldn't care less about that. Wrestling is a scripted, athletic performance to begin with, so I don't give a flying hoot who's where on the list. Here's my problem, is that the reason that she's able to be on the list is they started including women in 2021, but only women who wrestle both men and women. Now, Slamovich she wrestles on the independent circuit in Impact Wrestling, and she is a former GCW World Heavyweight Champion. She fights men constantly. I get it. I have no problem with her being on the list. My problem is I don't think there should be a requirement for the women who had to have wrestled men and women. If you're not going to delineate that they're two separate things, then they really should combine into one thing. Is it really that hard for Pro Wrestling Illustrated to say, you know what? Let's just put all the women in and we'll have one list, not two. Why is it a problem to have somebody like Becky Lynch in the top 10 and Charlotte Flair in the top 10 and, Mercedes Moné in the top 10? There's no reason they can't do that. And the only reason is, in a weird way, it's almost like a hybrid. We're going to keep men and women separated unless they wrestle each other. But the reality is the list is supposed to be about the Pro Wrestling Illustrated's top 500 list of talents. Why they have to delineate, I don't understand. And if you're not going to delineate, I'm okay with it. If you're going to delineate, then Slamovich shouldn't be in there because it's different. Because you can't convince me she's as good as Charlotte, as Becky, as Bayley, as any of the horsewomen. She's not. I would argue she's not as good as Trish Stratus at Stratus's advanced part of her career. She's not as good as maybe even some of the NXT girls, Tiffany Stratton, people like that. So I have a really tough time with her being 15 out of all the male wrestlers in the world. You put her up there, then you have to put a Charlotte or a Becky or a whoever into that list as well. Heck, Ronda Rousey is leaving professional wrestling, but when they created the list was before she left, I would have put Ronda Rousey before I would put Masha Slamovich. That's just my opinion. You don't have to agree. Feel free to comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts and take on everything I just said. Hopefully you don't hate me too much for it, but it is what it is. I always try to put a smile on your face. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode. We'll run down the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks, as always, out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for any music or sound we use. Today's podcast sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this game from Beazle Games by going to thegamecrafter.com and picking up your copy today. And if you're looking for your next career move, you're considering college, university life, or maybe you just need some formal training for that next career decision, stop by our website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Dr. Fro, and I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today. Until next time, everybody, take care. Have a great night.